This is Sydney Omarr, and this is about you, Libra, born from September 23rd to October 22nd. Your sign is intriguing.
Gentlemen, get the thing straight once and for all. The policeman isn't there to create disorder. The policeman is there to preserve disorder.
Ross Alhambra intersection at 15000. Contact Los Angeles Center, 2 minutes north.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for streaming, downloading, or otherwise listening to episode 10 of my Weird Record Collection. I'm Sean, and I'm coming to you from Chicago, inviting you into my odd world of strange, miscellaneous, and otherwise uncategorizable media for your turntable. In this episode, the focus will be on Libra, September 23 to October 22 by Sydney Omarr. Before I go further into the episode, though, I just wanted to touch on a little bit about the previous episode in which I reviewed a couple of Sears records. Specifically, I want to talk about that cardboard record, Getting More from Your Kenmore. Turns out, I discovered during post-production that there were at least 2 different versions of that record. I realized that when I linked to a video that was already on YouTube. Saved me some time doing it myself, right? And I noticed that the YouTube video was over 3 minutes. I'm like, wait a minute, the song's only like 2.5 minutes. Why is it so long? Turns out that it had an extra verse that wasn't on the copy that I had. Now, I mentioned in that previous episode that I have 3 copies of that record. I can't find any of them. So I can't check to see if any of mine has that longer version. I don't know what happened to them. They just disappeared. Couldn't have gone far. They couldn't have gone far. There's no reason they would have left my home. So I don't know. I'll have to check and see if I have the longer version. I saw that there was another cardboard record that Sears did. I don't remember what it was called. And I actually considered buying it before that episode was released, but turned out it had like a $95 price tag on it. And I turned it down. I was like, no. The most money I ever paid for a single record was $60 for a copy of the Beatles' Abbey Road on the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab label. And I think it was a worthwhile investment, by the way. My wife actually agrees with me on that because it sounded really good. It was really good investment. And I've since encountered another Sears record that I might consider buying, a 7-inch vinyl single that I think might have been a commercial that was sent out to radio stations, but I'll have to double check on that. And I don't expect anybody to hold me up to that. But having said that, now that I mentioned that, I probably will be held up to it. But anyway, now that I've talked about all that stuff, let's go into today's topic. But before we do, it would probably be a good thing to learn a little bit about this chap named Sydney Omarr. Now, because this is an audio podcast, I need to make it clear, first of all, the spelling of Sydney Omarr, Sydney, and his last name is Omarr. Keep that in mind. But why am I pointing this out? Well, for one reason, because he was born in 1926 with the name Sidney, and his last name was Kimmelman. He was a Philadelphia native, and ever since he was a little kid, he was fascinated with how the heavens might affect humankind. He was also interested in magic, stargazing, and numerology. By the way, numerology is where the name change comes in. When Sydney was 15 years old, he saw the movie Shanghai Gesture, which starred Victor Mature as a character named Omarr. Now, Sydney's study of numerology made him feel that changing his name would make things more interesting for him, so that's exactly what he did. He changed the I in his first name to a Y because the letter Y has a higher numerological value, and he took the name Omarr from that Victor Mature movie I mentioned, and he added a second R, again for numerological reasons. Just disclaiming here, I did not go into any depth into studying numerology or really astrology for that matter. In fact, my study of astrology goes back to my astronomy class in college when on the first night, somebody asked the instructor, "How is astrology related to astronomy?" And the instructor said, and I quote, "Astrology is bull." That's the extent of the studies in these topics that I've had. But anyway, let's get back to Sidney Omarr. Now, he was 15 years old when he did all that stuff, changing his name, seeing the Victor Mature movie. And here's what else he did when he was still 15. He started selling personalized horoscopes for $1 a pop. And he also got some gigs analyzing celebrity horoscopes for movie magazines. Oh, and he also wrote a book called Sidney Omarr's Private Course on Numerology, and he would sell copies of that book for $2 each. He did that when he was 15 years old, and I think I'm leaving stuff out too. 15. Well, in 1943, Sidney joined the U.S. Army and was stationed in Okinawa, and he became the first ever military astrologer, at least in the United States. And yes, you did the math correctly. He was only 17 years old then. During his time in Japan, he had a weekly gig on the Armed Forces Radio Network, and he would predict the outcomes of horse races and boxing matches. Unfortunately, I haven't, well, at least as of this time, been able to find out how accurate those predictions were. But that stint on Armed Forces Radio was just the beginning of a long career in journalism, having later landed work at UPI after he graduated from Mexico City College. And later on after that, he would be a news reporter on CBS Radio and also would have a nationally syndicated horoscope column that ran literally well after his death. And amid all the work that Sidney amassed during his life, he still managed to be a celebrity astrological consultant, working with such luminaries as Mae West, Aldous Huxley, and a relatively low-profile Hollywood actor named Ronald Reagan. Oh, yes, and he was also the author of many books that sold in the millions. And of course, you know, because of this podcast, he also recorded 12 astrology records, one for each sign of the zodiac. Sidney didn't have a very healthy life because in 1971, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Yeah, he was only 45 years old. And it really took a toll on his overall health. By the early 90s, he was blind, and he eventually became paralyzed from the neck down. But despite all that, Sidney still kept working. He was very active until he had a massive heart attack on December 23rd, 2002. And he died on January 2nd. According to his obituary in the Chicago Tribune, the horoscope he wrote for Leo, which was his birth sign, for the day that he died, read, and I quote, "You will beat the odds, much to the astonishment of experts." Now, remember how I said that Sidney Omarr's column continued after he died? Well, part of that is because he did prepare his columns well in advance, and ergo, he covered up through March of 2003. Most columnists do things like that. They write their columns in advance. And also, after he died, arrangements were in the works for his assistants to continue the column under his name. So now that we know a little bit about Sidney Omarr, let's talk about this Libra record. I'm about to tell you every single thing I was able to find out about Sidney Omarr's records. I say records because, well, he did one for every birth sign, as I mentioned before, but they're all on a label called Astro Records. And from what I can tell, Astro Records, which apparently is based in New York City, was a label that only had the Sidney Omarr titles. There were no other records on that label. His recordings were published on both vinyl and audio cassette, and they were released in 1969. And the records had at least 2 label variations. One label had a black background, one had a blue background. My copy is the version with the blue background, by the way. And the album cover is, well, it's hard to describe, I guess, but it's trimmed in a gold color, and at the very top, in a fancy calligraphy font, it says Libra, and then over to the right of that, it has in a sans serif font, September 23 to October 22. And then further to the right, it has in a slightly smaller boldface font, Sydney Omarr talks about your life, love, money, and health. The words that I read louder were uppercase, by the way. Underneath that, for I'd say about 3/4 of the entire cover, you have a map of the zodiac. I guess it's a map. I don't know what you call it. It's just a little circle that has drawings of each of the signs of the zodiac. And there's a caption in the middle that says, "Presenting Sydney Omarr, the world's most renowned astrologer." And on the lower left of the picture, you have the Astro Records logo along with the catalog number, which in this case is A109. Flip the album cover over, and you have a little bit about Sydney Omarr with a heading of, "Here's what an internationally renowned writer says about Sydney Omarr's analysis of you." I'm not going to read the whole thing, or else this would require a separate episode, but it is written by Henry Miller, and who is listed here as one of the world's most respected and controversial authors, is fascinated with Omarr's astrology and interpretation of the zodiological signs. And he basically writes about like why astrology is a wonderful thing and all that. And there's a picture of Sydney looking very serious in the middle of the cover. And below his picture, it has kind of a track listing, a very concise listing. It says side 1, all about your sign. Side 2, how the 11 other signs of the zodiac relate to you. And then below that, you have the Astro Records logo. And then below that, you have the address for Astro Records, which is 1650 Broadway, New York, 10019. But what about the contents of the record itself? Well, now I told you what the track listing is according to the album cover's back liner notes, but if you take the record out and look at the label, actually the track list for side 1 is just one single band, about 19 minutes, give or take, and it's called Libra, All About You. Side 2 is titled How Libra Relates to the 11 Other Signs of the Zodiac, and that side, by the way, is divided into 11 tracks: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Each of those bands, it's about, I'd say, a minute and a half on average, give or take. Now, what are you going to hear when you listen to this record? You are going to hear Sydney Omarr's voice and nothing else. No introductory music, no fanfare, no nothing. You're just listening to a guy talk. And what does he have to say? Well, I took some notes about what he said here. First, on side 1, when he talks all about Libra, my birth sign, which is why I chose this record, by the way, why I bought it, and also why I chose to talk about it for this particular episode, given the time of year. Those of you listening in the future, this episode was first published on October 15th, 2024. But what do we know about Libra according to Sydney Omarr? Well, Libras consider all sides of the story, according to him, and that does kind of match up with me. It really does. A Libra would rather hurt the self rather than cause injury to another, and it kind of does go along with me, really. Sydney says that the planetary indicator for Libra is Venus. What does that mean? I don't know. But the Venus symbolism involves luxury and love, fulfillment and frustration, beauty and the beast. So it sounds like we have some dichotomies in a way. Libra is associated with marriage, partnerships, legal affairs, public relations, and publicity. Well, I am married, and I did work in public relations for a couple of years, but that, I don't know about the rest. Legal affairs, publicity, I don't know. If I had publicity, I'd have a heck of a lot more listeners. But anyway, Libra, as Sydney says, is adored by many, disliked by others. And when I heard him say that, the first thing that came into my mind was, you can say that about anything, about anybody. And sure enough, the next thing he said was that you can say that about any sign, but it's particularly apropos to Libra due to the Venus association. A Libra can be completely in the favor of the public eye one moment, out the next. A Libra is easy to love, but also by the I Ching principle, or as Sydney would say, I Ching, easy to hate. Sydney calls Libra a captivating individual who seeks balance and justice, but could be involved in something less than beautiful. Ooh, whatever that's supposed to mean. A Libra at times becomes discouraged and reverts to self-pity. I don't know about that. Discouraged, sure. Self-pity, I wouldn't go that far. Sydney says that if people lash out at you, the Libra, it's because you challenge them with your display of idealism. I think that's true about anybody, really. And as a result, people are going to try to belittle you, but they will revere you and secretly wish to emulate you. Oh boy, I don't think anybody wants to emulate me. But what they really want is some breathing room, time to digest your thoughts, your principles, and examples. Now, here's something that I was really interested in hearing. Tips for men about Libra women. Yeah, I might be applying 2024 standards to 1969, but does he really have a right to say this stuff? But anyway, here's what he has to say. For the Libra woman, love is all important to her, and so are her surroundings. Carelessness in taste is one way to lose a Libra woman. That's what he said, word for word, which I can imagine that's true for anybody, really. You could lose anybody with bad taste. One fault with a Libra woman, again, according to Sydney Omarr, I'm just the messenger here, being affected in an extreme manner by manners and outward appearances. A Libra woman might bypass someone or something worthwhile because she insists on manners before morals. Now, this next little tidbit about a Libra woman seemed awfully specific. Libra women are apt to be admirers of Oscar Wilde. I don't know what that's all about. And according to Sydney Omarr, Libra women's moods can be all the way to the sky and down to the cellar. And Libra women tend to say, show me, but at the same time don't practice what they preach, proving their own abilities or explaining their motives. Libra women expect men to appreciate without asking, accept without doubting, and love without bargaining. Now, how about hints for women about Libra men? Well, let me see if I agree with him about Libra men. He tells women to avoid any display of irritability. I can't judge myself on that. I don't know if that's true. A Libra man seeks a woman who has an even temper. I think everybody does. Come on, Sydney. Jeez. A Libra man is appreciative of talent, art, literature, and music. Bingo. Yep, right here. He's got my number there. A Libra man encourages hobbies even if such encouragement costs money. Yep, that's this guy. One thing that a Libra demands is refinement. I don't know if that's necessarily true for me. I don't demand it. I might appreciate it, but I don't really demand it and I don't seek it out. But I love what Sydney has to say about what he calls language of the street. I'll let him do the talking on that.
He may not come out and say it, but when you use language that is of the street variety, when you carp, when you are quick to anger, he cringes.
Sydney Omarr, everybody. Anyway, he also says that Libra men have a sense of humor. I sure do. I absolutely do. And a Libra man is nobody's fool, although at times he might act like one. I'm sure that it's absolutely true of me personally. Now, going back to Libra in general, Sydney says that Libras are self-contradictory, but wonder why people are puzzled by them. I don't know if that's necessarily true about me. I don't know. I'm not a good judge of myself. But I like what he says about attracting weird people. In fact, again, I'm going to let Sydney speak for himself here.
You attract unusual or far out people, and in turn, you are attracted to these persons. You see, Libra, routine people tend to bore you. Routine activity can leave you cold, listless.
I'm not going to tell you everything he said. I mean, you can go to YouTube and listen to what he has to say about Libras. I'm just going to highlight some of the more interesting things at this point on, or else we're just going to be here forever. Now, according to Sydney, a Libra has an agonizing tendency to leave himself or herself open for punishment, or themselves. Maybe? I don't know. Now, here's something that really stuck out to me here. Sound is important for Libra. Music, voice, etc. Well, for me, that's, yep, he's got me there. A Libra can appreciate math, music, and the music of the spheres. That is the rhythm of the universe. I don't know what that, I don't get that cosmic. He does have some criticisms about Libra, and Sydney, why don't you tell us about your Libra criticism right here?
If I were to criticize you, Libra, I would say or ask, where is your sense of direction? You are many-sided, but you encounter difficulty in forming a policy, fixing a viewpoint, charting a direction. On the negative side, you are like a rudderless ship. The motor is running, but where are you going?
Thank you, Sydney. Oh, he also says that Libra is attracted to law, order, arts, various cultures, and the rights of the underdog. Sure, I can see that. However, the involvement, the methods of a Libra in such matters is subtle because Librans are afraid to make a dent. I don't know if that's necessarily true for might be. So as a result of that, Libras become either discouraged or enamored with the idea that it takes time if only balance is maintained and anger is suppressed. Now, Sydney Omarr says that Libra has to learn the importance of making a decision one way or the other. He says one thing you have in spades, anxiety. When you do begin making decisions, anxiety will evaporate. That's true for anybody, I think. Now, this thing kind of ties to what he said earlier about Libra. He says that it's almost possible to love and hate a Libra almost simultaneously. Interesting. And let me, once again, I'm going to let Sydney speak about harmony. Sydney?
Make your life a song which sings instead of squeaks. Harmonize. Get into the rhythm of your own being. Now let's be frank, Libra. You can't play the game both ways, either life or an imitation of life. You are, in actuality, a warm, passionate being. And until you accept this, you are denying a very real, a major part of yourself. There is no reason for this self-denial. Start enjoying yourself. Make sure your life is a song that sings.
And because Sydney Omarr is into numerology, he had to bring a little tiny bit of that into the discussion here. He said that numbers associated with Libra are 6, 4, and 9. Why he chose that order, I have no idea. I wasn't able to contact him to clarify that because, well, he's kind of dead. Anyway, he also said that Libra is associated with the lumbar region, which includes the kidneys. Gems for Libra are diamond and opal. Color is indigo. Metal is copper. Now, this is interesting. He says Libra is favorable with Leo, Aquarius, Sagittarius, and Gemini. My wife is a Sagittarius. Not favorable with Cancer, Capricorn, and Aries, and neutral with Virgo, Scorpio, Pisces, and Taurus. And that pretty much wraps up his discussion of Libra, excuse me, or as he says on the record, Libra.
Now look, Libra.
Which goes against Webster's Dictionary's pronunciation guideline for Libra. Does not go against dictionary.com, though. So, I don't know. Pick your poison. I took Latin 1 in high school, so I'm going to say Libra, but then again, I should also say Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo, but hey, what are you going to do?
Listen, Libra.
Anyway, side 2 is when he talks about how Libra relates to each of the other signs of the zodiac. And again, I'm not going to get into everything here, or else we're just going to be here for much longer than we should be, as if we aren't already. One comment he said about Aries is that Libra is attracted to Aries in kind of an opposites attract way. Libra will not be bored with experiencing Aries. This is an interesting thing he says about Taurus and borrowing money. Sydney, take it away.
Taurus affects you in a manner which causes a sigh, a thought that perhaps after all settling down might be the solution. But to settle down in the comfort to which you both are accustomed, well, that takes money. So a loan, borrowing from partners, friends, the bank, this comes into the picture.
Thank you, Sydney. Interestingly, Cancer is, as Sydney Omarr says, not the best sign for Libra, but makes a Libra aware of potential. And Cancer has a tendency to prod Libra into achieving higher power and status, and that could all be good if you avoid panic, he says. And Cancer is favorable in business ventures, although in business affairs, Cancer could be too demanding for your taste. And that with careful concessions, Libra and Cancer can have a profitable relationship. So fellow Librans out there, you want to make some money, hook up with a Cancer. Another thing I'm just going to keep brief is if you're a Libra and you're interested in charity and being helpful in, say, hospitals and maybe even behind-the-scenes activity in TV and theater, connect with a Virgo. If you're a Libra and you think you're too trusting, get together with a Capricorn. Now, this is interesting here. For Aquarius, Sydney says that Libra is physically attracted to, but subject to sudden breaks, possible scandal, and ultimate exhaustion. Wow. So I guess he's saying Aquarius will wear a Libra out. And he says Aquarius is not for you if you want to settle down, if you want stability, and you have had enough excitement in your life. Well, good thing I didn't marry an Aquarius because I want some excitement. A couple of things about Pisces that he says. First of all, here's another sound from Sydney.
I cannot get too excited about this association, but listen, Libra, at times you do have to be brought down to earth. Your sign is of the air element, and maybe too often your head is in the clouds.
So really, my friends, that is the record. That is the Sydney Omarr Libra record, pardon me. And with all that said, I'm going to rate this record, but first, I'm going to kind of wax philosophical about my record collecting thoughts. What I'm going to talk about this time is a bit of a different side of record collecting, and that's what to do about duds. To be honest, it was this episode's feature that made me think of this. This might be a bit of a spoiler as to how I may be rating the Sydney Omarr record, but once this episode is out in the potosphere, I'm going to put the record in the box of records, CDs, and DVDs I set aside to take to one of the nearby used record stores for an exchange. I mean, I really don't foresee listening to this thing again, and it's not the most exciting thing in the world, at least not for me. It's just Sydney Omarr talking about Libra. He pretty much jumps right in. There's barely an intro. There's no final thought, no transitional music, nothing. To me, it's not worth holding on to even as a novelty. And that happens. You may end up with a dud in your hands from time to time, so what should you do with these duds? Well, it depends, really. I mentioned a box I have that I'll bring to a used record store for a trade-in. The box contains a lot of things that really aren't worth much individually, but together, I might get enough store credit to buy a brand new record or two, or maybe a handful of used ones. Recently, an old friend called and asked me about her old Beatles records. She's a first-generation fan whose Beatles records definitely look and play back like those that belong to a first-generation fan. She was planning to sell them to a record store. I told her expect to be lowballed, especially given the condition of the records. I don't mean that as a slight against any particular record store. It's just, that's the truth. First of all, you're not going to get a lot of money for a record from selling it to a record store. A record store has bills to pay and needs to make money. So they're going to buy at a low price and then offer that same thing for sale at a higher price. Typically, what the store personnel will do is go through the records you brought in, maybe make a couple of passes through the bunch, take the ones they really want, and then offer you usually cash or store credit, with store credit being a few bucks more than the cash. If you do decide to go this route and try to sell off your records to a used record store, I strongly recommend you check with the store before you do that, just to make sure that there's going to be somebody there when you go who will be available to make a deal with you. Another dud I received, and this one was a huge disappointment, a brand new album from one of my favorite groups. It shipped to me straight from the factory earlier this year, 2024, and I've mentioned before that before I play a record that newly enters my possession, I give it a cleaning, usually through my Spin Clean record washer. As I was running this record through the Spin Clean, I noticed it looked a little bit odd. It looked warped. Sure enough, when I put the record down on a lint-free cloth I had on the table, it had what we call a bowl warp, meaning that it was warped kind of in the shape of a bowl. I put my fingers on the label as the record lay on the cloth, spun it, and it kept spinning freely like a top. A flat record will not be able to do that. I was so upset, though. I shot a video of the record spinning like that. Again, it shouldn't be spinning when it's on top of a table on a lint-free cloth. I sent the video to the record company with a friendly note asking if I could get a replacement, and they got back to me right away and said, absolutely, we'll send you out a new record. And sure enough, they did. I got just the record. I didn't get a new cover or anything, which is fine. I just wanted the record because I already had the cover. The new record still had a slight warp, but it was much better. It was playable, and by listening to it, you wouldn't be able to tell there was a warp. Plays back with no problem. And they didn't ask for the old record back. They said, just keep it and do whatever with it. So what did I do with that bowl warped record? Well, it's on colored vinyl. And if you're listening through YouTube, you will actually see what I did with it. And the vinyl has a really cool design, so I hung it up as a decoration, which, by the way, is a pretty common thing, actually. If you've been to any quirky shops, especially with a retro theme, you probably have seen vinyl records repurposed for other uses, like potato chip bowls. It's a common one. Maybe the inner part of the record is cut out and being used as a coaster. Even clocks. You might see records made into clocks, which actually is pretty easy. All you need to do is have the clock mechanism, which is very inexpensive and easy to attach to a record. So that's another option, just reusing the record for some other purpose. Or what if it's a copy of an album that you really, really love, but it's just worn out, has too much surface noise to be enjoyable, or in some other way is just something you don't want to play on your turntable? Well, if the front cover is in decent shape, frame it and put it on your wall. Or if the dud in question is just a dud because of personal taste or because it's an extra copy you don't want and you can get at least a few bucks for it, hey, put it on eBay, Discogs.com, or wherever else you might be able to sell something. Just make sure you ship it in a proper record mailer. You can get those from various sources like probably Amazon, Bags Unlimited for sure. The only thing is you usually have to order them in bulk. So if you don't foresee yourself selling, say, more than 5 records, that might not be your best option. But what if you just have no rhyme or reason to keep a dud in your collection? You can't justify taking it in for a trade-in. You can't justify putting it up for sale or whatever else have you. My advice, leave it somewhere in a communal area that has some kind of a leave something, take something pile. I did that once at the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago. There was a table out in the lobby for a while where there was a box of records that had a sign on it that said free. I put one of my duds in that one. I don't think it's there anymore, by the way, you Chicago people. So that might be an option. Or if you really want the thing out of your sight, well, there's always skeet shooting, I guess. Don't try destroying a vinyl record with a hammer, by the way. It won't work, as I found out personally with a copy of In the Year 2525 that I somehow ended up with. This will come as no surprise to those of you who've been listening to this podcast regularly, but it is a surprise to those of you who are listening for the first time. I rate each record on a scale of 1 through 5, including